All right, hello everyone. This is the May 17th blockchain meeting. First item of business, let's talk about the mainnet. How are things going? I didn't see any problems over this week, but anyone else? Any items to discuss? All right, I guess mainnet's fine. Testnet? Did the interruption in service get dealt with from last week?
I don't think, yeah, I don't think we took action on the issues from last week.
Yeah, I think that the interruption in service was actually 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Like we talked about it last week, but it was a while back.
Yeah, I think Marvin noticed that there's a few things going on there.
But everything is fine now. I haven't noticed anything wrong with it, so. Cool, no news is good news. Let's run to the board. Alrighty, is Matt on the call? Hey, do you want to just briefly talk about the two PRs you have here that are in draft status about microblock mining events?
Yep, so one of them is to have a Stacks node that's acting as a miner event, which I need that for testing against the API using the private testnet setup. And then the other one is just adding a couple fields to the microblock payload that's sent to the event observer. So just a couple things I need for the API. I might need help getting the tests implemented for those that you brought up.
Okay.
It's just a little bit intensive for me to try to work on that code base right now, along with the API.
Okay, yeah. I think that all you really have to do is just make sure, they exist. So if you just looked at one of the integration tests, I think we have a test for the event observer. But yeah, happy to help with that. Is that the only reason you're still in draft status?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
Great. We'll take a look at those after the meeting. Charlie, how are we doing on the updating configs?
Charlie's out of office.
Okay.
Anything I can assist with here?
I just had a couple questions about the proposed changes to the configs, because that implies, among other things, that we're getting rid of bitcoin.blockstack.com at some point, or we're getting rid of publicly hosted nodes.
I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay. That's actually a relief, because I think that would break a lot of people's nodes.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's not the plan. Yeah, I would have to look at this issue specifically to see what's being proposed here before I comment.
Okay. Yeah, my main concern right here is in the mainnet follower conf, we switched the Bitcoin settings to point to a local node as opposed to bitcoin.blockstack.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, this is for the test. No,
it's the mainnet.
Yeah.
I think that it's maybe preferable actually to get people to default to a local host.
I think that's the goal, is to try to compel people to run their own Bitcoin nodes versus relying on the Blockstack node, or Hero node, I should say.
We could continue running a public node, but I don't know. I don't see a good reason to have people default to using our public node.
Right.
I think one good reason could be it significantly raises the barrier to entry for spinning up more nodes.
Sure, but the trust relationship is really bad.
Yeah, I guess the question then becomes do we have an offering up for them using our node still? Because if you can imagine this playing out two ways. First, we do what we're proposing here, and we say that you have to run your own node by default. But if you want, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you can edit your config file and point it to a public node, such as bitcoin.blockstack. if they even get that far, like if they spin up the node, they realize it's not working, and then they just give up. I'd be curious to know what the drop-off rate for that is. Second,
That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that could be worrisome, because that could just mean that nobody, or like, only a small number of people spin up nodes.
I will say, from my experience, what I have seen is some people have network latency, issues coming back to our node because we're only in, a single geographic region for this node.
Yeah.
So people that are really, thousands and thousands of miles away have a hard time syncing quickly. I have sent to them, it's basically a map of all the known Bitcoin nodes in the world. And they just chose a different one that was, geographically closer to them. Maybe we could add something like this to the docs to say, if you're having problems, try one of these other nodes.
Actually, that would be great, because I think that kind of solves this problem. Because the second thing I was going to say is, like, we get them to use our node, but then we somehow nag them to stop. Like, at least then people spin up the nodes, they already have their foot in the door. And I think the ask of switching to a different Bitcoin node after you already have a Stacks node is a smaller ask than trying to come up with a Bitcoin node before you've even started to use the Stacks node.
Yeah.
But I do like that idea, though. Like, if there could be like a map somewhere, or a link to that map in the README file saying, like, pick a node.
Yeah, it does exist. Let me see if we can find the link, and I'll share it in the chat.
Yeah, because then we could even have like a script or something that just does a ping test on a handful of nodes and then picks the fastest one, says we recommend you use these.
I'm not sure that we should be recommending that people use any Bitcoin node that they're not running. Like, the trust relationship with the Bitcoin node entered here is like really high levels of trust. Like, if the Bitcoin node just like stalls your chain, like, it can arbitrarily deny service, and your node has like no ability to consult another authority.
I feel like maybe we're spending way too much time on this. This is a config
Yeah,
file that
right.
exists that people will copy paste in. There is a manual step required anyways here. The commitment that we have made in the past is that if people just download the binary and run it with no configuration, if they just say, Stacks node, whatever mainnet, then it will spin up in follower mode without having to specify any additional configuration. I think that commitment still holds true. And so then with respect to these additional config files, I see no reason why we need to supply a default Bitcoin node here as an option whatsoever.
I think this is that default config file, though.
Is it?
No.
The one that gets picked up is embedded in the code. It's in the Rust code. It's not in any TOML file.
Okay, we can table this for now, keep moving on the other topics, but I do think this is something that we will want to at least spend some more time thinking about. I agree with you, Aaron. I guess the question becomes, like, do we value setting users up for minimal trust from the get-go, even if it means that we have a high drop-off rate? Or do we just try to encourage users to stop using the Bitcoin node after they've already spent some time understanding the Stacks node? Like, it's not the philosophy we disagree on. It's just a method of how we get there.
Yeah.
Initial balances for local setups. This ready for review, Ludo?
Yes, ready for review.
Okay. I'll just add myself as a reviewer. Pavitra, is the V2 POX endpoint ready to go here?
I missed your review, so I'm going to have to put out a new version today.
Okay, sounds good. I think we talked about that one last week. There's been no movement. Aaron, are we going to move this into 0.12 potentially, the LCOV coverage?
Potentially. I think that this PR needs like a ton of updates because it was like built before the refactor.
Yeah. I guess like the question, maybe the deeper question here is like, do we want to keep working on Clarity CLI or try to merge it into Clarinet and then just go from there? Well, I guess maybe the question there is like, do we have is Clarinet ready for mainstream use, and or do we have a deprecation plan for Clarity CLI? Like if we don't have an answer right now, maybe we should just add it to it as a discussion item.
Yeah, I don't think that we have an answer right now. And I think that, yeah, go ahead, Ludo.
Yeah, like I don't feel comfortable setting Clarinet as a default tool as long as it's not using the canonical VM.
Okay.
Because right now it's still using some kind of extract that I'm doing manually.
I see.
And yeah, like it should be fine, but yeah, I would feel more comfortable if it was just using like the Clarity VM coming from the blockchain directly without manual edits.
CLI will be supported in depth for much longer then,
yeah.
At least until that can be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe this is worth adding then.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be like we could hand it off to like a community member. Like it's a pretty self-contained PR.
I can update it. Shouldn't be.
Okay. Private local testnet support. Is this still a draft, Aaron, or are we ready for review here?
Let me take a look at it and make sure that it's ready for review. Yeah.
Already. M1 support.
Those binaries do not actually work on M1.
Okay, so this is still not ready.
Yeah.
Are we waiting for the Rust compiler to catch up?
I think that we're waiting for some sort of cross compile library to catch up, because like M1 compiles fine, or like the Rust compiler can compile to M1 fine. The issue is compiling from like an Intel VM, which is what we're trying to do here.
I see. Makes sense. Yeah, it's not like we can put M1 VMs in the cloud.
Yeah.
How are we doing on this this super task here, read the refactoring?
Yeah, working on another PR right now. It's feeling like it's really close to being able to move this to the done column. There aren't that many references to the rest of the code base left in VM. So I'm purging those, and there's a few more things that will have to be hoisted into the new types package. But yeah, or types module rather. But yeah, it's coming along.
Sounds good. Regarding the absent POXN should be forkable. That I should have a PR for in the next couple of days. It's working in the 2.1 branch. It just needs some more tests. This is something that you really want to test hard to make sure it's working. Aaron, I actually did have a question just very quickly about an implementation tactic here. In SIP 7, a block can be chosen as an anchor block more than once, right? By multiple different reward cycles. Is it okay if in 2.1 we forbid that?
Yeah, that should be yeah, I mean, I think it should be fine. Really terrible things must have, well, as like the reason that you wouldn't want to forbid this is if you have an entire cycle that was like malicious, and then in the next prepare phase, everyone is trying to choose an anchor block that occurred before that cycle.
Okay.
And so then they end up picking an anchor block that's already been picked before.
But you'd be able to tell that it was picked before, because you can look at the block commit itself in 2.1 and figure that out.
Right, but that might be the most recent valid commit. If all of the commits in between were produced by like a malicious miner that never revealed their blocks.
Okay, so you're saying that we do have to make it so that it can be picked more than once.
I think so. It just really depends on like how much more painful that makes this protocol.
It does make it a lot more painful. We would have to start morphing the burn chain database.
I see.
Which we could do. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because, a block commit could transition from being, the anchor block for reward cycle A to the anchor block from reward cycle B not equal to A. And you would potentially need to look back in the past to see like, oh, as of reward cycle C, like, is this block commit the anchor block for A or for B?
I see.
Maybe there's a way we can cheat and not have to worry too much about. I mean, we could store just a list maybe of anchor block reward cycle identifiers per anchor block. That would grow so slowly, it's probably not a problem.
Yeah. That would probably be the better approach. But we can think about more whether or not we can just forbid this outright. Because like the case, because I think that the case that this might be possible or this might be useful for is like extraordinarily degenerate.
Yeah, what I was thinking is that like if a block is selected as an anchor block and you have to discard that anchor block later because it was malicious, you still have, if there's n block commits in the entire blockchain, you still have n-1 options for your next anchor block.
Right. Like the non-malicious miners would be picking an anchor block that hadn't been picked before anyways.
Right.
Because there's like other blocks. Like whatever the most recent like valid anchor block was, like there are going to be valid commits after that that could be chosen as the anchor block.
And moreover, the number of reward cycles that have happened, unless Bitcoin miners are wholesale censoring stacks for a long time, the number of reward cycles the number of prepare phases that happened is considerably smaller than the number of block commits you can choose from.
Yes.
And go at a linear pace.
Yes.
Okay, I'll see what I can do with this. It would make it a lot simpler if we could assume that a block commit can be chosen at most once to be the anchor block commit.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not an assumption. It's like a protocol rule.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But whether or not that rule like leads to,
Yes.
Permanent denial of service, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say tentatively, yeah, I think it's fine to introduce that rule. Like the downsides are just so unlikely, and the network is already so terrible.
Yeah.
That
we've already hard forked at that point to stop the miners.
Yes.
By the time that becomes a concern.
Yeah, something already like nuclear apocalypse has happened for the chain. So
that's my thinking too. Emitting miner relevant Prometheus metrics. Vivithra, have you started on this?
Yeah, I have. I know what I want to do for it, so I should be getting them out today or this week at least.
All right, awesome. Aaron, how are we doing on the epoch switch?
Yeah, we're in a pretty similar place that we were at the end of last week. I'm like working my way through all of the different tests to get it so that the burn chain will report the current epoch.
Yeah, all those tests, they use the null burn chain database.
Well, the problem is actually now the tests that don't use the null burn chain database.
Yeah, that's problematic.
Yeah.
I had a question about tests. Jude, you mentioned that you're working on tests for 1805, and you were working on testing as well. I'm wondering if we should sort of think of testing for 2.1 a bit more holistically and think about the kinds of tests we would want to do and try to create like some common abstraction or common framework that we can kind of reuse. So I was just curious if you two have discussed this or coordinate a little bit, and is it worth having that conversation to just think about what new capabilities do we need to construct good and easy to write 2.1 tests?
Speaking just for myself, like I don't find myself writing a lot of test infrastructure. I find myself spending most of my time just writing tests, like novel test code that has to exist. Like my test good put is pretty good.
Yeah, I think that, so if you look at the, there's like the 2.1 epoch switch discussion topic, it like outlines some basically common tests that'll need to be evaluated for every new Clarity feature. And my intention is certainly to make kind of like a general purpose test there, where like you just supply sort of an example of new Clarity code, and it'll run those sort of like repeated tests with the new code. So I've thought a little bit about this. Yeah, and my plan is that this first PR will include this sort of reusable testing.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Cool. RESTful API for querying blockchain status. I think this is V1 Health.
Yeah, I wrote the endpoint. The testing is a work in progress right now.
All right, sounds good. New issues. Well, this is old. How did this get up here? I don't think we have any new issues unless this one was just, oh, this was reopened. That's right. This was reopened last time. This is a stale issue. I believe we talked about the rest of these already. So just shifting gears to the backlog. I know this is a PR. I have to go update the SIP for this. I just haven't had a chance to start it yet. Same with this right here, but potentially we could knock this out. I'm getting a warning when there's multiple UTXOs available before the 2.0.12 release. I'm not sure what to do about this. The testing, the reason why the reg test Krypton node is going slowly, I'm not sure why. I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Shifting over to 2.1 work streams. I went ahead and put this into a project board. Everything is still in the to-do column mostly. The two things that are, this isn't review in progress, it's just in progress. This is just capturing the two things that are currently ongoing in Stacks 2.1, the Clarity versioning with pragmas and the absent POX anchor blocks handling. Mine isn't really a blocker per se because its blast radius is basically contained to the burn chain database. But once Aaron's feature here merges, a lot of these things will become unblocked and we can just start working on them right away afterwards. So that's heartening. Discussion items. Timing for the 2.0.12 release.
Yeah, so I added this item. Wanted to check with the team. So I think we settled on a monthly cadence and also the fact that we don't want to release before like the prepare phase. So I think the next prepare phase is maybe Monday next week. So yeah, is everyone okay with the idea of yeah, like cutting a release maybe today or tomorrow, deploying it, having it running this release on maybe some testnet nodes and mainnet nodes this week, and then announce a release early next week.
To be explicit, Ludo volunteered to be the release manager of this next release whenever it happens.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I should have start with that.
Yes. I would be supportive of like basically the release candidate this week, and then an announce like trying to target the tag announce release for next week. Like if Tuesday is still in the prepare phase, like if the prepare phase begins Monday, it'll finish sometime Tuesday probably. Like we can wait until the prepare phase finishes.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me. I will try to have issue 2645 merged before this, but it's not a big deal if it's not. That's the one about warning people if they have multiple UTXOs. Continue to review still issues to that at the end. Also, this is a good question right here. Right now, our testnet has a different block cost limit than the mainnet. It's considerably larger. This is potentially a foot gun for developers working on the testnet because they may be surprised in a bad way to learn that the smart contracts that they wrote and used successfully on testnet no longer work on mainnet because certain code paths exceed the block limit. Should we consider switching the testnet over to the mainnet block limit next time it gets rebooted?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Like I was talking with Philippe from Arcadico, and he got surprised by this issue. So yeah, I can open a PR today.
Yeah, I'd be fine with this. Like, I think that's a good idea. Probably better to do it sooner rather than later.
Should we also talk about potentially resetting the testnet? We have an open discussion topic on that too.
Yeah, this would necessitate resetting the testnet.
Oh yeah. There's no way around it. You would have to do this.
I guess we have our answer.
Yeah.
But I think that the costs on testnet are the same than on mainnet, right? It's just that the mocknet is different.
Are they? I thought the helium block limit.
But the helium block limit's not used, I think, on our testnet. We should double check. But I think, yeah, I think Ludo's right. Like
so Xenon has the same block limit as mainnet.
Yeah, Xenon's using mainnet block limit.
Oh, great. Okay. Then this is really just a matter of fixing mocknet then.
Yeah.
Okay. I misread. Okay, that could be done like whenever without breaking anything. We could do that for 212 potentially.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so this means that we do not yet have an answer on whether or not we should reset testnet.
Okay, yeah, darn.
Well, it sounded like there was no objection. So
yes, I think we should.
So I think we have an answer by default, which is unless maybe what we can do is give a heads up today that we're hoping to reset testnet next week, because I do think a lot of people have deployed a bunch of stuff on testnet, so it will likely be disruptive. And at this point, there is enough teams that are doing stuff on the testnet that we should at least be very vocal about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we should sign up for doing this work now, but it could be useful to like train ourselves to have multiple active test nets, simply because we're probably going to want to do a 2.1 test net.
Yeah.
And we might not want to like actually do a reset on like the existing Xenon testnet and bring all the infrastructure down and be super disruptive to people.
Yeah, from a hero operated infrastructure perspective, I think the act of spinning up a completely independent testnet is relatively easy. I think it's more a question of terminology and how we want to kind of refer to these things and integrate them in, the rest of our infrastructure. But just like spinning things up, I think is relatively straightforward. So I don't think we need to do like a ton of work on it right now.
Yes, Aaron, if you wouldn't mind sending me an issue so we can start having discussion around the points that Walker just said, mainly terminology.
Cool. We do number our Xenon testnets. Like I think that we're at like Xenon 1, Xenon 2 or something, maybe Xenon 3.
Well, you mean in the magic bytes?
Yeah, we number the magic bytes. So
I
we can
think
just
the
use
testnet might be at like X5 or X6.
Yes.
Don't worry, we got lots more room to go.
One thing I want to bring up, a lot of terminology has been passed around very recently as far as Xenon and Krypton in regards to testnet and mocknet. Is there anything on the horizon of reverting those to standardized names like reg test, mainnet, testnet instead of using the noble gases?
If we have multiple test nets, I think we'll need to have multiple identifiers for them, with like maybe testnet 2.0, testnet 2.1 or something.
Right. I'm just thinking of this purely from, like an end user standpoint. If they have to know that to launch a testnet, they have to use Krypton versus the testnet identifier, it can be a little confusing. So I'm just curious, how long we plan on using the noble gas names.
Yeah, to answer your question, Joel, at least from my perspective, at least, in a lot of end user documentation, as well as the way the URLs are structured, we already have the reg test, testnet, and mainnet framing. So I'm in favor of applying that consistently. And I think the one place where it shows up prominently for users where it might be confusing is specifically in the stacks node config, where you have to supply the mode, and the mode has to be Krypton or Xenon.
And just to be clear, that's exactly where I'm seeing some confusion.
Yeah, so if that's the only piece, then yeah, I'm in favor of simplifying that, and unless there's objections there. But we have a lot of I think stuff in the code that still refers to things like helium and neon, which cleaning that up is a much larger task.
Do you want to open an issue for that, Jay Wiley?
Yeah, I can do that.
Sounds good. I think it's fine, like if we just leave the internal code names in place, as long as they're not user facing. Like that seems to be a pretty low hanging fruit right there. All you'd have to do is just change the command line structure for the stacks node. Before we get back into which Bitcoin node users run in deprecation path for Clarity CLI, are there any other discussion topics that are at hand? I'm just going to check these off. All right, maybe we can take the easier one of these. Like, do we see Clarity CLI sticking around in the future? Or do we have like a 1.0 release plan for Clarinet?
One thing I would say here is we should come up with a deprecation path once we have a viable alternative. And I think that Clarinet becoming a viable alternative basically depends on Clarinet being able to just pull in a VM library module, which I think is maybe also like the success criteria for the Clarity refactoring. Like the Clarity refactoring is like completely done in my mind once Clarinet can just build from whatever output we have there.
That's true.
Does that match your thinking, Ludo?
Yeah, definitely.
Do we want to worry about feature parity with Clarity CLI?
I think we, yeah, I think that we already reached feature parity. Yeah.
Does Clarinet report runtime
We
costs
do.
and asset movement, and will it report line coverage?
Yes.
All the above?
Yes, and not yet, but I don't have the line coverage yet, but yeah, we have the cost, the events.
That's good.
The
Like, those are the things.
assets management, yeah, the assets management. Yeah.
All right, that's great to hear, because those are things that people in
Yeah.
practice really rely on, as well as the developer tooling. So
Yeah.
sounds good. Okay, so this might happen then probably by Q2, I want to say. Maybe even earlier, like end of Q2.
So yeah, I don't know what is going to be the priority of the Clarity refactoring, knowing that we have like the cost that we need to ship pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we sacrifice the 2.1 timeline for this. I'm just saying that this just sounds like it's close. It's further along than I had thought originally.
Mm. Yeah.
All right, so whenever
Because
this happens, whenever we have a separate VM crate, that's when we can start thinking more about this. Sounds like.
Yeah, I'm hoping this will be pretty soon. You know, in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome, glad to hear
okay,
it.
so we are going to actively working on this refactoring before the. Yeah, what's the plan on that front?
What was that, Ludo?
Yeah, I was wondering what's the plan in terms of timing? Like, are you going to first be working on the cost and then coming back to these things, or what's the? How do you see?
That's a good question. I've been kind of like splitting time between those two tasks. I haven't really wanted to like stop working on the refactoring, just because it feels like it feels more productive to kind of continue working on it right now, just given that I've already started and I don't just want to like kind of leave it in limbo. But yeah, I don't really anticipate, like, I don't think there's all that much work left. I mean, we still have to talk a little bit more about, you know, what we want to do with SQLite and some of that stuff, but it's almost
go away.
Yeah, that might be a separate work stream, but anyway, yeah, I don't really feel like there's like an enormous amount of work left at all.
In the interest of making sure that we have the right runtime costs for the VM, which do you think is more likely to happen faster? Either like finding a stopping point on the refactoring and just working on the runtime costs, or finishing the refactoring, using the refactored VM to build all the whatever tooling you need to do runtime cost analysis, and then proceed to finish the runtime costs there?
I don't really feel like the refactoring work will help the runtime cost work very much, unless I'm missing something. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely just stop working on the refactoring for now and dedicate more time to the runtime cost stuff, if that's if you guys think that would be prudent.
I'm just thinking like, if you want to budget, this is like a t-shirt size was like an L or an XL task. It could easily take a month, and that puts us like end of June.
Yeah.
And we want to probably have a testnet running by like mid-July. I'd want to say this.
Yeah.
So I'd say like maybe like find a stopping point this week where you're comfortable like leaving things as they are, and then switching over to runtime costs.
Okay.
First of next week.
Sure. I mean, I'm kind of at a good stopping point with the refactoring stuff at the moment. We just, you know, just got the codec stuff merged, so I could just do that.
All right. I know it sucks to like leave things like not completely finished, but it's just that we're working on a deadline.
Yeah, totally. Makes sense.
Does that sound good to everyone? Like nothing else is blocked on the VM refactoring, right? Like this, like read working on runtime costs isn't going to disrupt anyone else's work stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good. So let's write that down. Which Bitcoin node do users run? I guess like the question would be like, which onboarding path do we want? Do we want users to start up a Stacks node, then later switch to a different Bitcoin node? Or do we just want users to choose a Bitcoin node from the get-go? So I think maybe the question we still have to answer.
Jude, in your mind, kind of what are the goals, and what are we trying to optimize for? Again, going back to the previous discussion, in my mind, kind of the common workflow that we want to make it really easy and frictionless is people download the binary or build it from source, and they just say, you know, Stacks node testnet or Stacks node mainnet, and it should spin up a working follower node without any additional configuration. So that's still the case for everyone else who's, you know, wanting to run some specialized configuration. Is the thinking that the default config files should be pre-populated with a known set of good Bitcoin nodes? And if yes, what is the rationale for that?
Not quite. I think the question is more fundamental than this. Like, do we want to indefinitely support the case where the user does that? They just download and install the binary and it just works. Do we want to have to force users at some point to spin up their own Bitcoin nodes, or at least to choose a public Bitcoin node, which we can help with. But the point is, I think Aaron's point is actually very prescient. We don't want the whole of the Stacks network to be dependent on just a few Bitcoin nodes that we run.
What if we use the default Bitcoin nodes that Bitcoin has in their code base? Something like that.
I think they actually dynamically discover Bitcoin nodes. Which we could do that too. Like the Bitcoin peer network protocol has a way to propagate the addresses of other Bitcoin nodes as well as what services they run. So we could just do that. We could just use the Bitcoin.blockstack as like a seed node, and it just asks for the addresses of peers and just proceeds from there.
I actually really like that idea, Jude.
I think that in almost all cases where a user like actually cares about getting truthful responses from their node, they should be running their own Bitcoin node.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel that's what we should prominently display.
Yeah, and so I think that in these config files, we should default to just localhost with a note saying like, we recommend that you run your own Bitcoin node. Like the use case of like this, somebody just downloads the binary and runs start, like sure is fine to support. We could like emit a warning saying like, you're using a public Bitcoin node. We recommend that if you want to run a node long-term, you run your own Bitcoin node. I don't think that we should be recommending that people use public Bitcoin nodes. And I don't think we should be optimizing for that case either. Because that's just like suggesting somebody enter into this trust relationship with somebody else. And like, I don't think we should be doing that.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, that's the healthiest thing. I mean, I think there's kind of two problems we're working with. Like the first one is like, how do we stop people from relying on us? But that's not necessarily the same as saying, how do we encourage users to run their own? That latter will solve the former. But it's sufficient, but not necessary. maybe there's a way we could help users get started with their own Bitcoin nodes at some point. Like this could be like a grant proposal or something. It could be a pretty self-contained work stream.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me, it's stuff like this that makes me grateful we don't rely on TX index equals 1 anymore, because that would make this part significantly more painful. Do we want to try to kick users off of our public nodes at some point?
I don't know. I don't feel ready to make that have that discussion yet.
Yeah, I'm not saying we do it. I'm not saying we like put a date on it or anything. It's just, is that a general tactic we want to try to employ at any point, do you think, or in the foreseeable future?
Sorry, what was the tactic we're talking about?
If we do we have do we see ourselves in the future trying to be so zealous in encouraging people to run their own nodes that we ultimately turn off Bitcoin.blockstack?
So first of all, I think it's useful to clarify the V here, right? There isn't a unified V. I think Hero might make choices, and Foundation might make its own choices, and other entities might make their own choices. So from a Hero perspective, I would say that for now we're happy to continue hosting these public Bitcoin nodes, because they do provide some value for at least some use cases, while simultaneously, actually, we can even be data driven about this. I think that right now we're kind of speculating about how much use these public Bitcoin nodes have for production use cases. I think if we go out and actually either ask people or do some analysis, we might find, either it confirms that hypothesis, or I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of production use cases are already using their own Bitcoin nodes. So all that to say, I think what Aaron described, that sounds fine to me, that all the config files, they default to localhost. We put in sort of notices to say, we recommend you run your own nodes. And then in terms of emitting a warning, if you're connecting to our public Bitcoin, that seems like a nice to have. But I don't think Hero is at a point where we zealously would turn those nodes off or deny access to them, at least right now.
When I said I was just referring to the default behavior of the Stacks node.
I see.
We force it to expect the user to supply a Bitcoin node, or we can't.
I see.
Yeah. So there's only one, yeah. One of these things will be true and the other one will be false.
I would say probably premature to do that. Maybe we can revisit that later.
Yeah.
The ecosystem is more mature.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to solve this today. I just want to get like a read of the direction in which we want to head.
Yeah.
All right, any other items? Questions, comments, concerns, coughs?
I just want to say, well, I don't know. I'm like new in this meeting, so I just want to say hello. My name is Greg.
Oh, my bad. Actually, I was just thinking about that actually both Greg and Patrick, if you can just introduce yourself for the rest of the group, that would be great. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, today's my first day. Sorry. I'm Greg. Today's my first day, and I don't know. I'm a software engineer. And not sure what else to say about it, but past includes like machine learning and Google and trying to do a startup, and now very interested in the blockchain.
And awesome. Welcome, Greg.
Welcome, Greg.
I'm Patrick. This is my start of my third week at Hero, and I'm a technical writer. I'll be handling the docs.stacks.co stuff. So very interesting. Yes, very interested to hear the discussion of whether we should add instructions on how to spin up a Bitcoin node to that. So I'll probably be reaching out to some of you guys in the future for more documentation stuff.
Sounds good.
Fun addition for Patrick is he was instrumental along with Charlie in helping us make running a Gaia hub easier.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, his instructions were awesome. There was a lot of deletions in the Git dev, which we like to see.
Oh yeah, red lines are the best lines.
Removing content's the easy part.
Well, so
Yeah,
choosing
I think
is the hard part, though. All right, nice to meet you both. Hope to see more of you.
yeah, I think it's been an exciting month for Hero. We added 3 new members today, and then we had Patrick and Farah start 2 weeks ago. So we're 5 for the month so far.
Awesome. Yeah, Hero's really growing fast. All right, I'm going to start recording.